Being good at the work is not a business model. There is one idea that quietly ruins a lot of small businesses before they even open. It sounds responsible. It sounds logical. It even sounds brave. I'm good at this, so I should turn it into a business. That sentence can change a life. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. Because being good at the work can give you confidence. It can give you clients. It can give you reputation. It can give you the courage to leave a job you hate. But it can also trick you. It can make you believe that skill is enough. That if you can cook, you can run a restaurant. That if you can treat patients, you can run a clinic. That if you can design, you can run an agency. That if you can cut hair, you can run a barbershop. That if you can fix cars, you can run an auto shop. That if you can edit videos, you can run a media business. That if people already ask you for help, then the business is almost built. But that is not a business. That is proof that you have a useful skill. And a useful skill is not the same thing as a company. A skill lives in a person. A business has to live in a system. That difference sounds simple, but if you miss it, it can cost you years. Because the market does not reward you just because you are talented. The market rewards a complete machine. A machine that attracts attention, builds trust, converts interest, delivers value, collects money, controls costs, solves problems, creates consistency, learns from mistakes, and does it again tomorrow, then again next week, then again when you are tired, then again when a client is difficult, then again when something breaks, then again when you are not in the room. That is the part most people underestimate. They imagine the work. They do not imagine the machine. They imagine the thing they are good at. They do not imagine the boring structure around it. And that boring structure is where the business actually lives. Not in the dream, not in the logo, not in the social media announcement, not in the first excited client, not in the feeling of finally being independent. The business lives in what repeats. And if what repeats is chaos, then chaos is the real business. Think about someone who is excellent at their job. At work, everyone knows they are reliable. They solve problems. They care more than others. They notice details. They know how customers think. They know how to calm angry people. They know how to finish what others leave half done. And after years of watching managers make mistakes, a thought appears. Why am I doing this for someone else? It is not a stupid thought. In fact, sometimes it is completely fair. Maybe the person really is underpaid. Maybe the boss really is incompetent. Maybe the company really would struggle without them. Maybe they really are carrying more than their title says. But here is the trap. Knowing that your boss is bad does not automatically make you a good business owner. Being better than your employer at the technical work does not mean you understand the business behind the work. Those are different games, and many people discover that only after they have already risked their savings. When you are an employee, the business hides many things from you. You see the client. You see the task. You see the service. You see the product. You see the part that touches your hands, but you may not see the full machine. You may not see the cost of acquiring the client. You may not see the failed campaigns. You may not see the taxes. You may not see the cash flow gaps. You may not see the supplier problems. You may not see the refund rate. You may not see the hiring mistakes. You may not see the legal risk. You may not see the discounts that quietly kill the margin. You may not see the difference between revenue and profit. You may not see how much of the business depends on decisions that happen before the work reaches you. So you look at your part and think, I can do this better, and maybe you can. But the business is not only that part. The business is the entire chain that makes that part possible. That is why some of the most talented people become some of the most exhausted business owners. Not because they lack ability, because their ability becomes the entire operating system. They become the sales department, the production department, the customer service department, the finance department, the training department, the quality control department, the complaint department, the emergency department, the marketing department, the cleaning department, the decision department. And then one day, they realize something humiliating. They did not build freedom. They built a job with no off switch, no paid vacation, no guaranteed salary, no clear end of the day, no one above them to blame. No one below them who knows enough to take over. And no clean separation between the business and their life. That is when the fantasy cracks. Because the dream was simple. I will be my own boss. But the reality becomes, I am now responsible for everything I used to complain about, plus everything I never knew existed. That is not freedom. That is exposure. And exposure can be useful if you are prepared for it. But it can destroy you if you mistake it for independence. This is why the first question should not be, what business should I start? The first question should be, what system would need to exist for this business to survive without using me as its only engine? That question is uncomfortable because it forces you to stop admiring your own talent for a second. It forces you to ask whether your skill can be separated from your body, your mood, your memory, your schedule, and your personal attention. And if it cannot, then what you have is not yet a business model. It is a personal performance. A personal performance can make money. It can even make good money. But it is fragile. Because the performer gets tired. The performer gets sick. The performer gets distracted. The performer has bad days. The performer cannot be everywhere. The performer cannot scale infinitely. The performer cannot serve every customer personally forever. And if the whole model depends on the performer, then the business has a ceiling. That ceiling is not the market. It is the person. This is the painful truth. Your talent can become the bottleneck. The thing that makes people trust the business can become the same thing that prevents the business from growing. Because people want you. They ask for you. They trust you. They say, I only want you to do it. At first, that feels like success. It feels like proof. It feels like status. But later, it becomes a cage. Because if the customer only trusts you, then the business has not created trust. You have. If the quality only exists when you supervise, then the business has not created quality. You have. If decisions only move when you decide, then the business has not created leadership. You have. If money only comes in when you push, then the business has not created a sales system. You have. And that means the business is not standing. It is leaning on you. There is a big difference between those two. A business that stands can grow stronger. A business that leans gets heavier. And the more it grows, the more it crushes the thing it leans on. That is why growth is not always good news. Growth can expose weakness. Growth can multiply confusion. Growth can turn a small operational problem into a daily crisis. Growth can make the owner feel successful in public and trapped in private. A business can have more clients and less control, more revenue and less profit, more employees and more dependency, more movement and less direction, more recognition and less peace. That is why the obsession with growth can be dangerous. If the model is broken, growth does not fix it. Growth amplifies it. If your pricing is weak, more sales can mean more losses. If your process is unclear, more customers can mean more complaints. If your team is untrained, more demand can mean more errors. If your delivery depends on you, more orders can mean less sleep. If your cash flow is unstable, more activity can mean more pressure. Growth is not a cure. Growth is a multiplier, and a multiplier does not care whether it is multiplying strength or weakness. This is where many small business owners get confused. They think the next level will save them. More customers, more followers, more employees, more locations, more services, more products, more advertising, more visibility. But if the foundation is wrong, more is not salvation. More is weight. A small mess can be manageable. A big mess becomes identity. People begin to say, that's just how the business is. That's just how clients are. That's just how employees are. That's just how entrepreneurship works. But sometimes that is not entrepreneurship. Sometimes it is just poor design repeated long enough to feel normal. And normal is dangerous. Because once chaos becomes normal, the owner stops questioning it. They start defending it. They say, I have to do everything myself. Nobody works like I do. Clients always want too much. Employees never care. There is no time to organize. I will fix it when things calm down. But things do not calm down in a business that is built on reaction. They only change shape. Today, it is a client problem. Tomorrow, it is a cash problem. Next week, it is a supplier problem, then a staff problem, then a quality problem, then a pricing problem, then a personal burnout problem. But underneath, the root is often the same. The business has no reliable operating system. It has effort. It has talent. It has urgency. It has sacrifice. But it does not have enough structure. And effort without structure becomes expensive. It costs money. It costs sleep. It costs relationships. It costs clarity. It costs patience. It costs creativity. It costs health. And eventually, it costs the original love for the work. That may be the saddest part. A person can begin with a craft they love and end up resenting it. The baker hates baking. The doctor hates consultations. The designer hates clients. The teacher hates teaching. The mechanic hates the shop. The creator hates creating. Not because the work changed, because the business around the work became unbearable. The skill did not betray them. The structure did. And this is why the real conversation about small business should be less romantic. Not negative, not cynical, just less romantic, because romantic advice is everywhere. Quit your job. Follow your passion. Be your own boss. Take the leap. Believe in yourself. Start before you are ready. Work harder than everyone else. Those phrases are not always false, but they are incomplete. And incomplete advice can be dangerous when money, debt, reputation, family, and years of life are involved. Yes, start before everything is perfect. But do not start before you understand what must be tested. Yes, believe in yourself, but also verify your numbers. Yes, take risk, but do not confuse risk with blindness. Yes, work hard, but make sure the hard work is building something that will reduce future dependency. Because there are two kinds of hard work. Hard work that builds a machine, and hard work that feeds a fire. The first one can create freedom. The second one only keeps you warm while the building burns. Many owners spend years feeding fires. They solve the same problems again and again. They answer the same questions. They correct the same mistakes. They chase the same late payments. They rescue the same process. They calm the same type of client. They train people verbally and then complain when they forget. They accept exceptions and then become angry when exceptions become expectations. At some point, repeated problems stop being problems. They become instructions. They are telling you where the system is missing. If customers always ask the same question, your communication is unclear. If employees always make the same mistake, your training is weak. If money always feels tight, your pricing, spending, or cash flow needs attention. If you always have to approve everything, your decision rules are not defined. If you always feel guilty resting, your business has invaded your identity. Every repeated problem is a map. But most owners treat it like an interruption. They solve the symptom and ignore the design. Then the symptom returns, and they call it bad luck. It is not always bad luck. Sometimes it is a system asking to be built. This is where the owner has to change roles. Not from worker to dreamer, from performer to architect. An architect does not only ask, "What do I need to do today?" An architect asks, "Why does this keep happening? What part of the structure creates this? What rule is missing? What standard is unclear? What decision should not depend on me? What can be simplified? What can be measured? What can be taught? What can be removed? What must never be improvised again?" Those questions feel slower in the beginning, but they are faster in the long run. Because every process you build is one less conversation you repeat forever. Every rule you define is one less conflict you negotiate from zero. Every checklist you create is one less quality failure caused by memory. Every metric you track is one less decision made by mood. Every boundary you set is one less silent resentment. And every task that stops depending on you gives back a piece of your life. That is what freedom looks like in real business. Not a beach laptop fantasy. Not a motivational poster. Not the feeling of being important. Freedom looks like a system that knows what to do without requiring your emotional energy every minute. It looks boring at first. Then it feels priceless. Because the more a business depends on your personal intensity, the more fragile it is. Intensity is not a strategy. Intensity is a temporary fuel. Useful at launch, dangerous as a lifestyle. There is only so long you can run a business on adrenaline before the cost appears. The body slows down. The mind gets impatient. Small problems feel personal. Every message feels urgent. Every mistake feels like betrayal. Every client feels heavier. Every employee feels disappointing. Every day begins with pressure and ends with unfinished tasks. And then the owner starts to become the kind of boss they once wanted to escape. Impatient, reactive, controlling, always watching. Always correcting, always disappointed, always convinced that no one cares enough. That is one of the quiet ironies of entrepreneurship. If you build the business badly, you may become the boss you hated, not because you are a bad person, because the structure makes you desperate. A desperate owner controls too much. A tired owner communicates badly. A confused owner changes priorities. A scared owner accepts bad clients. An overwhelmed owner hires badly. A proud owner refuses to measure. A burned-out owner calls survival discipline. And little by little, the business becomes a mirror, not of the dream, of the owner's unexamined habits. That is why building a business is not only a financial challenge, it is a psychological one. You have to face your relationship with control, with money, with fear, with status, with rejection, with delegation, with uncertainty. with being replaceable in certain tasks. That last one is difficult. Many owners say they want freedom, but emotionally they want to remain indispensable. They want the business to need them. They want clients to ask for them. They want employees to depend on them. They want every important decision to pass through them. Because being needed feels like value. But being needed everywhere is not freedom. It is captivity with compliments. A business that cannot operate without you may flatter your ego, but it will also eat your calendar. And eventually, you will have to choose. Do you want the business to prove how important you are? Or do you want it to prove how well it is built? Those are not the same goal. The first goal makes you central. The second goal makes the system strong. The first goal gives you control. The second gives you options. The first feels powerful early. The second feels peaceful later. And for long-term wealth, peace often matters more than drama. Because financial freedom is not just about making more money. It is about reducing the number of things that can force your hand. A business can make money and still reduce your freedom if it depends on your presence, if it depends on one client, if it depends on one employee, if it depends on one platform, if it depends on one supplier, if it depends on discounting, if it depends on constant emergencies, if it depends on your willingness to suffer. Then it may be producing income, but it is also producing fragility. And fragility is a cost, even if it does not appear in your accounting. This is why every small business owner should track more than revenue. Revenue tells you what came in. Profit tells you what stayed. Cash flow tells you whether the business can breathe. But dependency tells you whether the business is becoming an asset or a trap. Ask yourself, what would stop if I did not show up tomorrow? What would fail if I did not answer my phone? What would become confusing if I did not explain it personally? What quality would disappear if I did not supervise? What money would not be collected if I did not chase it? What client would leave if I were not the one serving them? What decision is still trapped in my head? Those questions are not comfortable, but they are more useful than asking whether your logo looks professional. They reveal the true structure, because a business is not tested when the owner is present, motivated, healthy, and watching everything. A business is tested when something is missing. When the owner is tired, when a trained person leaves, when the client complains, when demand increases, when sales drop, when a supplier fails, when the owner cannot personally save the day. That is when the real business appears, or the lack of one. A business that only works under perfect conditions is not strong. It is lucky, and luck is not a system. Luck may help you start. It cannot be your operating plan. So the goal is not to eliminate every problem. That is impossible. The goal is to stop being surprised by the same category of problem forever. There should be fewer repeated fires, fewer decisions trapped in one head, fewer unclear promises, fewer emotional prices, fewer bad clients accepted out of fear, fewer tasks that only one person understands, fewer days where the business survives only because the owner refuses to collapse. That is progress, not just more sales, less fragility. Because a fragile business can look successful right before it breaks. It can have a full schedule, full tables, full inbox, full order list, full waiting room, full social media comments, and still be structurally weak. The owner knows it. They may not say it publicly, but they feel it. They feel the pressure behind every new client. They feel the fear of a complaint. They feel the cash tension. They feel the dependency. They feel that one bad month could hurt badly. They feel that one key person leaving could create chaos. They feel that growth is exciting, but also dangerous. That feeling is information. Do not ignore it. It may be telling you that the business needs architecture before expansion. And architecture begins with clarity. Clarity about the customer. Clarity about the promise. Clarity about the price. Clarity about delivery. Clarity about roles. Clarity about money. Clarity about standards. Clarity about what is not allowed. Clarity about what will not be sold. Clarity about who is not the right customer. Because a business that says yes to everything becomes shapeless, and a shapeless business is hard to manage, hard to train, hard to market, hard to price, hard to improve, hard to protect. Many owners are afraid to narrow. They think narrowing means losing opportunities, but sometimes narrowing is what makes the business understandable, and what is understandable can be repeated. What can be repeated can be improved. What can be improved can be delegated. What can be delegated can become less dependent on the owner. That is the path. Not glamorous, but real clarity, repetition, measurement, improvement, delegation, freedom. Most people want to skip to freedom, but freedom is the result of the previous steps. not a reward for opening a business. Opening gives you responsibility. Design gives you freedom. And that is the part people do not want to hear when they are excited. Excitement says, just start. Design says, start but observe what repeats. Excitement says, you will figure it out. Design says, document what you figure out. Excitement says, say yes, you need clients. Design says, not every client deserves access to your business. Excitement says, hire help. Design says, help without process becomes another job for you. Excitement says, grow. Design says, only grow what can survive being bigger. That last line matters. Only grow what can survive being bigger. Because bigger is not always better. Bigger bills, bigger mistakes, bigger delays, bigger payroll, bigger exposure, bigger stress, bigger promises. If the model is healthy, bigger can be powerful. If the model is confused, bigger can be punishment. So before chasing growth, ask, what would break first if demand doubled? Would quality break? Would delivery break? Would cash break? Would communication break? Would the team break? Would I break? The answer tells you where the real work is, not in dreaming bigger, in strengthening the weakest point. That is how serious businesses are built, not by pretending weakness is negativity, but by finding it early enough to fix it. A weak point ignored becomes a crisis. A weak point studied becomes a project, and projects can be solved. Crisis only consumes. This is why the best small business owners are not always the most passionate. They are the ones who can look at reality without flinching. They can love the business and still question it. They can believe in the product and still test the offer. They can serve customers and still set boundaries. They can work hard and still refuse to glorify burnout. They can be proud and still admit the numbers are not good enough. They can be ambitious and still move in the right sequence. Sequence matters a lot. Sell before you expand. Measure before you scale. Document before you delegate. Clarify before you advertise. Price before you discount. Train before you blame. Simplify before you add. Stabilize before you multiply. Most failures are not caused by one dramatic mistake. They come from doing the right things in the wrong order. Hiring before defining the role. Renting before proving demand. Growing before knowing margins. Advertising before fixing the offer. Adding products before understanding what already sells. Delegating before creating standards. Borrowing before understanding cash flow. Leaving a job before testing the business under pressure. Each decision may look reasonable alone, but together they create a trap. And traps are dangerous because they do not look like traps at first. But they look like progress, a bigger place, a new employee, more services, more clients, more equipment, a stronger image. More movement. But if each new step increases pressure without increasing structure, the business is becoming heavier, not stronger. Strength is not how much you carry. Strength is how much the structure can carry without damaging the person inside it. That is the standard. A business should not require the owner to become superhuman. It should be designed for human beings. Humans forget, so the business needs checklists. Humans get tired, so the business needs routines. Humans misunderstand, so the business needs clear communication. Humans avoid uncomfortable money conversations, so the business needs payment rules. Humans make emotional decisions, so the business needs metrics. Humans resist boundaries, so the business needs policies. Humans cannot scale infinitely, so the business needs delegation. That is not bureaucracy. That is respect for reality. And reality is the most important business partner you will ever have. You can ignore it. You can argue with it. You can post motivational quotes against it. But reality collects. It collects through rent, through payroll, through taxes, through late payments, through bad reviews, through exhaustion, through customers who do not return, through numbers that do not match your optimism. So the mature owner does not fight reality. The mature owner studies it and adjusts. That is the whole game, not perfection. Adjustment. A business that adjusts can survive mistakes. A business that protects the owner's ego cannot, because ego does not like data. Data interrupts the story. Ego says, this product is amazing. Data asks, then why are people not buying again? Ego says, this client is important. Data asks, then why does this client consume so much time and leave so little profit? Ego says, we need more marketing. Data asks, or do we need a clearer offer? Ego says, my team does not care. Data asks, did you train them, measure them, and define the standard? Ego says, I'm the only one who can do it right. Data asks, or have you failed to turn your standard into a teachable process? That is brutal, but useful, and useful truth is better than comfortable confusion. This kind of thinking is not meant to discourage entrepreneurship. It is meant to rescue it from fantasy, because entrepreneurship can be powerful. It can create income, independence, skills, assets, options, identity, opportunity. It can change a family's future. It can transform a person's relationship with money. It can turn knowledge into leverage, but only if the person understands what they are really building. You are not only building a product, you are building a way for that product to reach the world without destroying the person who created it. That is the real challenge. Not, can I do the work? But, can I build the system that makes the work deliverable, profitable, repeatable, and less dependent on my constant rescue? That is the question. And once you ask it honestly, the business looks different. Suddenly, the boring parts become strategic. The schedule matters. The script matters. The intake form matters. The payment rule matters. The training document matters. The refund policy matters. The follow-up message matters. The weekly review matters. The cost sheet matters. The customer filter matters. The opening checklist matters. The closing checklist matters. The process for complaints matters, because each small structure removes a little chaos. And freedom is often built by removing chaos one repeated problem at a time. Not all at once, not in a perfect plan. One dependency at a time. One process at a time. One unclear promise at a time. One messy task at a time. One weak number at a time. That is how a business becomes real. It becomes less dependent on the owner's memory. Less dependent on panic. Less dependent on heroic effort. Less dependent on, I'll figure it out later. And more dependent on something stable. That is what you want. Not a business that makes you feel important every day. A business that gives you more control over your life with time. But that requires a hard trade. You must be willing to stop being the center of everything. Not the center of vision, not the center of ownership, but the center of every little operation. Some people cannot do that. They say they want scale, but they protect dependency. They say they want freedom, but they keep every decision. They say they want a team, but they do not trust anyone enough to train properly. They say they want systems, but they refuse to write anything down. They say they want growth, but they keep changing the rules emotionally. And then they blame the business. But sometimes the business is only revealing the owner. That is why the real work starts with a mirror. What part of the business is chaotic because the market is hard? And what part is chaotic because I have not built the structure? Both can be true. The market can be hard. Customers can be difficult. Employees can disappoint. Costs can rise. Competition can appear. Platforms can change. But after you admit all that, there is still one question left. What is under my control that I keep avoiding? That question is where progress begins. Not in blaming the economy, not in blaming the client, not in blaming employees, not in blaming competition. Sometimes those things matter. Of course they do. But if every explanation points outward, the business cannot improve inward. And a business that cannot improve inward becomes dependent on luck. It needs the right season, the right client, the right employee, the right trend, the right platform, the right mood, the right month, the right everything. That is not strategy. That is hope wearing a business name. And hope can start a person moving, but it cannot manage the operation. So the owner has to become more honest, not more negative, more honest. Honest about what sells. Honest about what does not. Honest about which clients are profitable. Honest about which services create chaos. Honest about what the owner refuses to delegate. Honest about where the numbers are weak. Honest about what is being done only because that is how we started. That last one matters. A lot of businesses are trapped by their origin. They keep doing things a certain way because that is how they survived in the beginning. At the beginning, maybe the owner answered every message personally. Maybe they gave discounts to almost everyone. Maybe they customized everything. Maybe they accepted last-minute changes. Maybe they worked Sundays. Maybe they undercharged because they needed proof. Maybe they said yes to clients they should have rejected. And at the beginning, that may have helped. But survival habits can become growth problems. What kept you alive early can keep you small later. That is a painful transition, because the owner feels guilty changing the rules. They think, but this is how people came to trust me. Maybe. But if the same behavior now destroys your time, your margin, your team, or your mental health, then the business has outgrown that rule. A business must evolve its rules as it matures. Otherwise, it becomes a hostage of its first stage. And this is why many owners do not really fail. They freeze. They keep operating like beginners long after the business needs adult structure. They still price emotionally, still explain verbally, still track money loosely, still accept too many exceptions, still keep everything in their head, still believe the next busy month will fix the model, still think the next hire will create order. But order does not appear because a new person walks in. Order must already be designed enough for that person to enter it. If you hire someone into confusion, you have not hired help. You have created a second source of confusion. This is where many small business owners become bitter. They hire. The person struggles. The owner gets frustrated. The owner takes tasks back. The employee becomes passive. The owner says, "Nobody thinks." But the real issue is deeper. The business has no clear operating language. There is no shared definition of good. No clear definition of urgent. No clear definition of done. No clear definition of acceptable. No clear definition of profitable. No clear definition of client experience. So every person interprets. And interpretation creates variation. Variation creates mistakes. Mistakes create supervision. Supervision creates owner overload. Owner overload creates control. Control creates employee dependency. Employee dependency confirms the owner's belief that nobody can do it. And the loop continues. That loop can last years. It can become the culture of the business. The owner complains about being needed, but unconsciously builds a system where everyone must need them, because no one else has enough clarity to act. This is why documentation matters. Not because documents are exciting. They are not. Not because checklists are glamorous. They are not. But because a business without documented standards is forced to depend on memory, mood, and interpretation. That is too fragile. A checklist is not a prison. A process is not a lack of creativity. A rule is not an insult to intelligence. Done well, these things free intelligence. They stop people from wasting energy on preventable confusion. They make space for better judgment. They create a baseline. And once there is a baseline, improvement becomes possible. Without a baseline, everything is just opinion. One person says the service is good. Another says it is inconsistent. One person says prices are fine. Another says margins are weak. One person says employees are failing. Another says training is unclear. One person says marketing is the problem. Another says the offer is confusing. Without measurement, the loudest feeling wins. And feelings are useful signals, but terrible managers. A serious business listens to feelings, then checks reality. It asks, what actually happened? How often? With which customer? At what cost? After what decision? Compared to what baseline? That sounds less dramatic than blaming someone, but it works better. Drama gives emotional release. Data gives direction. And a small business owner needs direction more than release. Because release can become addictive. Complaining feels like action. Worrying feels like responsibility. Being busy feels like progress. Sacrificing feels like commitment. But none of those guarantee improvement. Improvement requires changing what creates the problem. If the same thing keeps happening, the business is asking for a new rule, a new process, a new boundary, a new price, a new script, a new filter, or a new decision. Not just more patience. Patience is not a business system. Patience is useful. But if your business depends on endless patience, the design is probably weak. Now, one of the hardest places to apply this is pricing. Because pricing exposes fear. Many small business owners undercharge, not because the market forced them to, but because they are afraid. Afraid of losing clients, afraid of being judged, afraid of seeming expensive, afraid of not being worth it, afraid that if they charge properly, the illusion of demand will disappear. So they choose a price that gets yeses, but not sustainability. And that creates a hidden trap. A low price can make you feel validated. People buy, people come, people say yes. The schedule fills, but the business still suffers because you are working too much for too little margin. You cannot hire well. You cannot improve equipment. You cannot absorb mistakes. You cannot pay yourself properly. You cannot survive slow months. You cannot invest in marketing. You cannot say no to bad clients because every peso feels necessary. A bad price creates a desperate business, and a desperate business attracts more bad decisions. It discounts too fast. It accepts impossible timelines. It tolerates abusive customers. It avoids investing in systems. It postpones training. It says yes when it should say no. Then the owner thinks the problem is volume. You need more clients? Maybe. But sometimes more clients at a bad price only increases the damage. If every unit sold carries stress and weak margin, more volume means more stress and weak margin at scale. That is not growth. That is multiplication of a mistake. So pricing is not just a number. Pricing is a boundary. It tells the market what kind of relationship this will be. It tells the owner whether the business can breathe. It tells the team whether quality is funded. It tells the system whether it can survive without cheating the owner's life. That does not mean every business should be expensive. It means the price has to be real. Real enough to deliver the promise. Real enough to cover costs. Real enough to create margin. Real enough to pay the owner. Real enough to improve. Real enough to say no to chaos. A price that only works if the owner suffers is not a real price. It is a delayed collapse. The same applies to customers. Not every customer is an asset. Some customers are disguised liabilities. They pay, but they drain. They buy, but they create confusion. They ask for exceptions. They do not respect time. They negotiate everything. They delay payment. They complain in bad faith. They require emotional management beyond the value of the sale. They create stress for the team. They make the owner afraid to check messages. And because they pay, the owner keeps them. But payment is not the only metric. A customer can generate revenue and still reduce the health of the business. That is why customer filtering matters. A serious business does not only ask, how do I get more customers? It asks, what kind of customer makes this business stronger? And what kind of customer makes this business worse? That question feels harsh at first, but it is necessary. Because if you do not choose your customers, your weakest boundaries will choose them for you. The market will test you. Some people will respect your rules. Some will push them. Some will ask for special treatment. Some will pay late. Some will demand more than they bought. Some will want urgency without paying for urgency. Some will punish you for being unclear. And if the business has no boundaries, every difficult customer becomes a custom business model. That is exhausting. You cannot build a stable operation around unlimited exceptions. Exceptions should be rare, clear, controlled, and priced when appropriate. Otherwise, they become the real standard. This is why policies matter. Cancellation policy, payment policy, refund policy, delivery policy, revision policy, urgency policy, warranty policy, scope policy, communication policy. People think policies are cold, but unclear expectations create more conflict than clear rules ever will. A good policy protects both sides. It tells the client what to expect. It tells the business what to enforce. It tells the team how to act. And it prevents the owner from negotiating every situation from emotion. Because emotional negotiation is dangerous. When you are tired, you give in. When you are scared, you discount. When you want approval, you overpromise. When you feel guilty, you accept blame that is not yours. When you are desperate, you accept conditions that weaken the business. A policy protects you from your weakest moment. That is not rigidity, that is maturity. And maturity is the theme underneath all of this. A mature business is not necessarily big. A mature business knows what it is. It knows who it serves. It knows what it promises. It knows how it makes money. It knows what must be repeated. It knows what must be measured. It knows what should not depend on the owner. It knows what kind of growth it can handle. An immature business can be busy, very busy. It can have sales. It can have attention. It can have movement. But it does not know itself. And because it does not know itself, every opportunity can pull it in a different direction. A client asks for something outside the core service. The owner says yes. A trend appears. The owner chases it. A competitor launches something. The owner reacts. A friend suggests a new product. The owner adds it. A slow week arrives. The owner discounts. A busy week arrives. The owner hires too quickly. The business becomes a collection of reactions. And a collection of reactions is not a strategy. This is why saying no is one of the most important business skills. No to the wrong client. No to the wrong price. No to the wrong partnership. No to the wrong expansion. No to the wrong employee. No to the wrong promise. No to the wrong habit. No to the version of growth that looks good but makes the business weaker. Saying no feels like losing at first, but it creates shape. And shape creates strength. A business with no shape cannot be remembered clearly. It cannot be managed cleanly. It cannot be marketed sharply. It cannot be delegated safely. It cannot become an asset. It remains a cloud of activity, and activity is not enough. This is another uncomfortable truth. You can work all day and still avoid the work that matters. You can answer messages all day and avoid fixing the offer. You can serve clients all day and avoid raising prices. You can post content all day and avoid measuring conversion. You can reorganize the store all day and avoid understanding margins. You can train someone verbally all day and avoid writing the process. You can be tired every night and still not be building. Busyness can hide avoidance. It gives you evidence that you are trying. But trying is not the same as constructing. Construction leaves behind something that continues working. A process, a relationship, a system, a metric, a trained person, a clearer offer, a better standard, a removed bottleneck. If the work leaves nothing behind except exhaustion, question it. Not every exhausting day is productive. Some exhausting days are just expensive repetition. The owner has to learn to distinguish. This is especially important for people who are naturally responsible. The ones who care, the ones who overdeliver, the ones who feel guilty when something goes wrong, the ones who believe that if they just try harder, they can hold everything together. These people are often praised, but they are also at risk, because responsibility without structure becomes self-exploitation. You become the safety net for every weakness in the business. Bad process? You compensate. Poor communication? You explain again. Weak pricing? You work more. Bad client? You absorb it. Untrained employee? You rescue. No system? You remember. No policy? You negotiate. No cash planning? You panic. And because you can handle it, the business never learns to stop depending on you. Your strength becomes the reason the weakness survives. That is a brutal sentence, but it is often true. The strongest person in a weak system can accidentally keep the system weak, because they are always saving it. So the goal is not to become weaker. The goal is to stop using your strength to protect bad design. Use your strength to build structure. That is different. Instead of answering the same question forever, create the answer. Instead of fixing the same error forever, change the process. Instead of calming the same type of client forever, filter earlier. Instead of covering every role, define the role. Instead of trusting memory, create a checklist. Instead of chasing money, change payment terms. Instead of blaming the team, improve training and accountability. That is how strength becomes leverage. And leverage is what small business owners often lack. They have effort, but not leverage. Leverage means one good decision keeps producing results. A documented process saves time again and again. A clear offer converts again and again. A trained person handles tasks again and again. A good payment rule protects cash again and again. A strong customer filter prevents damage again and again. A weekly metric review improves decisions again and again. That is the opposite of running on personal effort. Personal effort resets every day. Leverage compounds. And if you care about financial freedom, compounding matters, not just in investments, in systems. A business can compound knowledge, compound process, compound reputation, compound trust, compound efficiency, compound customer relationships. Or it can reset every morning, forcing the owner to rebuild the day from scratch. That is exhausting. A business that resets every day is not compounding. It is surviving. And survival has a ceiling. You can survive for a while. You can even make money while surviving. But survival mode is not where great decisions are made. Survival mode narrows your vision. It makes short-term relief look like strategy. It makes you accept bad deals. It makes you postpone important work. It makes you reactive. And reactive owners rarely build strong companies. They build busy ones. This is why the owner needs time to think, not as a luxury, as a business requirement. If you never think, the business cannot evolve. If every hour is consumed by operation, the business remains trapped at the level of operation. Someone has to ask the bigger questions. Where is the margin? Where is the friction? Where is the risk? Where is the dependency? Where is the opportunity? What should be stopped? What should be improved? What should be standardized? What should be delegated? What should never be accepted again? If the owner is always inside the work, who is designing the business? No one. And when no one designs the business is designed by accidents, by whoever complains loudest, by whatever emergency arrives first, by whatever client demands most, by whatever employee misunderstands, by whatever month pressures cash, by whatever the owner fears losing. That is not ownership. That is drift. And drift can feel like effort because you are moving constantly. But you are not steering. A real owner must steer. Even in a small business, especially in a small business. Because a small business has less margin for error. A large company can hide waste for a long time. A small business feels waste immediately. A bad hire hurts. A bad price hurts. A bad client hurts. A bad month hurts. A bad process hurts. A bad promise hurts. The owner absorbs it fast. That is why small businesses need simple systems, not complicated ones. Do not imagine giant corporate manuals. Start with the basic nervous system of the business. How do customers arrive? How do they decide? How do they pay? How is the work delivered? How is quality checked? How are problems handled? How is money reviewed? How are improvements made? If you can answer those clearly, you already have more structure than many people who call themselves business owners. The answers do not need to be perfect. They need to exist, and then they need to improve. That is the real process. Build a simple version. Use it. Measure it. Notice what fails. Adjust it. Train it. Repeat it. This is where many people get impatient. They want the perfect system before starting, or no system at all. Both extremes are wrong. Perfect system thinking delays action. No system thinking creates chaos. The better path is a living system. Simple enough to use, clear enough to repeat, flexible enough to improve, strong enough to reduce dependency. That is what a small business needs. Not corporate theater, not binders no one reads, not fancy dashboards that hide basic confusion. Just a living operating model. A way of doing business that becomes more intelligent over time. And the owner's job is to make sure learning does not disappear. Every complaint should teach something. Every delay should teach something. Every refund should teach something. Every difficult client should teach something. Every cash shortage should teach something. Every repeated question should teach something. Every employee mistake should teach something. But only if the business captures the lesson. If not, the same lesson returns, more expensive. More painful, more humiliating. That is what happens when a business refuses to learn. The market keeps charging tuition, over and over, and the owner calls it bad luck. But sometimes the tuition is unpaid homework. The business already showed the issue. The owner just did not convert it into change. This is why a weekly review can be more valuable than a new marketing trick. Once a week, ask, what happened? What sold? What did not? What caused stress? What caused profit? What repeated? What surprised us? What should never happen again? What should become a process? What should be removed? What should be tested next? That kind of review may not feel exciting, but it creates intelligence. And a business with intelligence beats a business with only energy. Energy runs out. Intelligence accumulates. This also changes the way you think about marketing. A lot of people think marketing is just attention. More views, more likes, more followers, more messages, more leads. But attention without operational capacity can hurt you. If your business cannot deliver well, more attention creates more disappointment. If your offer is unclear, more attention creates more confusion. If your pricing is weak, more attention brings more low-margin work. If your customer filter is poor, more attention attracts more chaos. Marketing should amplify what is ready to be amplified. If you amplify a mess, you get a louder mess. So before asking for more visibility, ask whether the business can handle what visibility brings. Can it respond? Can it convert? Can it deliver? Can it follow up? Can it collect? Can it retain? Can it learn? If not, the marketing problem may not be marketing. It may be readiness. That does not mean wait forever. It means build while you attract. Market, but watch what breaks. Sell, but measure what happens. Get clients, but improve the system around them. Do not separate marketing from operations. They are connected. A promise made in marketing becomes a burden in operations. If marketing promises speed, operations must deliver speed. If marketing promises premium care, operations must deliver premium care. If marketing promises simplicity, operations must be simple. If marketing promises expertise, the customer experience must feel expert. Otherwise, marketing becomes a lie, even if the owner meant well. And trust is expensive to repair. This is why the business promise should be designed carefully. Not vague, not inflated, not copied from competitors. A clear, specific, deliverable, profitable, repeatable. A promise that sounds good but cannot be delivered consistently will eventually damage the business. A smaller promise delivered consistently is often stronger than a dramatic promise delivered randomly. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds repeat customers. Repeat customers reduce pressure. Reduced pressure gives the owner room to improve. That is the cycle you want. Not constant chasing, not always needing new clients because old ones never return. Not always offering discounts because trust is weak. Not always explaining from zero because positioning is unclear. A strong business makes the next sale a little easier because the previous delivery created trust. That is compounding again. And compounding is what separates a business from endless labor. If every sale is as hard as the first sale, something is wrong. If every client requires the same level of persuasion, something is wrong. If every employee needs the same explanation forever, something is wrong. If every week repeats the same chaos, something is wrong. The goal is for learning to stay, for trust to stay, for process to stay, for clarity to stay. That is how the business becomes more than the owner's daily effort. Now, there is a psychological obstacle here. Some people resist systems because systems reveal the truth. When everything is informal, you can hide behind feeling. I think we are doing well. I think clients like it. I think prices are okay. I think we are growing. I think the team understands. But once you measure, you may discover things you do not like. The popular product is not profitable. The loyal customer is not worth the time. The team does not understand. The owner is the bottleneck. The price is too low. The marketing attracts the wrong people. The business is busy, but not healthy. That truth can hurt, but hidden truth hurts more. Because hidden truth becomes consequence, visible truth becomes decision. And business is decision. Not fantasy, not identity, not constant motion. Decision. What to sell, what not to sell, whom to serve, whom to avoid, what to charge, what to stop, what to build, what to delegate, what to measure, what to protect, what to sacrifice, what not to sacrifice. A business owner who cannot decide becomes a servant of circumstance. And circumstance is not gentle. It will fill your schedule with the loudest requests. It will fill your business with the easiest clients to attract. It will fill your day with urgent tasks. It will fill your mind with anxiety. Unless you design against it, design is how you defend the business from becoming whatever pressure demands. That is a mature way to think. Not how do I do more, but how do I protect the business from the wrong more? Because more can be poison. More clients you should not serve. More services you should not offer. More complexity you cannot manage. More payroll without enough margin. More advertising before clarity. More debt before stability. More promises before capacity. A serious owner respects capacity. Capacity is not pessimism. Capacity is truth. How much can we deliver well? How fast can we grow without breaking quality? How much cash can we risk? How much complexity can the team handle? How much can the owner carry without becoming the problem? That last question matters because many owners ignore their own capacity. They treat themselves like an infinite resource. They are not. No one is. And when the owner pretends to be infinite, the business learns to spend the owner carelessly. Every unanswered process becomes owner time. Every unclear rule becomes owner stress. Every weak employee training becomes owner supervision. Every bad price becomes owner sacrifice. Every bad client becomes owner emotional labor. Every missing system becomes owner memory. The business will consume whatever you make available. If you make your entire life available, it may consume that too. So boundaries are not personal weakness. They are strategic infrastructure. A business needs boundaries the way a building needs walls. Walls do not limit the building. They give it shape. Without walls, there is no room. Without boundaries, there is no business, only demands. Demands from clients, demands from employees, demands from suppliers, demands from bills, demands from ego, demands from fear, and the owner caught in the middle, trying to prove they can handle it. But handling everything is not the goal. Building something that does not require you to handle everything is the goal. That shift is huge. From handler to builder, from rescuer to designer, from performer to owner, from being the business to leading the business. And it will feel strange, because in the beginning, doing the work gives immediate feedback. You complete a task, you serve a client, you make a sale, you solve a problem. It feels productive, but building systems can feel slower. You write the process, you train someone, you create a form, you review numbers, you adjust pricing, you clarify policy, you define roles. You may not feel the reward instantly, but months later, those things start paying you back. A task completed gives you relief today. A system built gives you relief many times. That is why the owner must learn to value invisible work. The work nobody claps for. The work that prevents problems instead of dramatically solving them. Prevention rarely gets applause, but it creates freedom. The hero gets praised for putting out fires. The architect gets fewer fires. Choose carefully which role you want, because the hero is needed only when things are burning. And if you build your identity around being the hero, part of you may keep the fires alive. That is uncomfortable, but it happens. Some owners unconsciously prefer chaos because chaos proves their importance. A calm system can feel like losing relevance. But that is exactly where the owner's next level begins. When the business does not need you for every small thing, you can finally do the work only you should do. Strategy, partnerships, high-value relationships, new offers, financial planning, culture, hiring decisions, market positioning, long-term vision. These are owner-level tasks, but many owners never reach them because they are trapped approving details that should have become process years ago. So ask yourself, what am I doing today that should have stopped needing me already? That question can sting, but it reveals the path. Maybe you are still answering basic questions. Create a resource. Maybe you are still chasing payments. Change payment terms. Maybe you are still fixing delivery mistakes. Create a quality checklist. Maybe you are still handling every lead. Build a qualification process. Maybe you are still doing low-value tasks. Delegate or eliminate. Maybe you are still accepting bad clients. Create a filter and enforce it. Maybe you are still changing prices emotionally. Build a pricing model. Every answer is a doorway, not to instant freedom, to less dependency. And less dependency is the real currency. A business that depends less on your constant effort gives you back attention. Attention becomes better decisions. Better decisions create better systems. Better systems create better margins. Better margins create better options. Better options create real freedom. That is the chain. Not motivation, not hustle, not being your own boss. A chain of reducing dependency and increasing quality decisions. This is why small business ownership should be treated as design work, even if the business is simple, especially if it is simple. A small operation with clean design can outperform a larger operation with hidden chaos, because clarity moves faster, training is easier, marketing is sharper, costs are easier to see, customers know what to expect, the owner can make decisions with less noise, and the business can improve without needing a dramatic reinvention every month. Simplicity is not small thinking. Simplicity is power, but simplicity requires discipline. It means not adding every idea, not serving everyone, not changing the offer constantly, not confusing complexity with value, not building a business that only the owner can understand. A business nobody can understand without you is not sophisticated. It is fragile. The best systems are often simple enough to teach. That is a sign of strength. If you cannot explain how your business makes money, delivers value, and repeats quality in plain language, you probably do not understand it well enough yet. And that is okay. But admit it early, because clarity can be built. Confusion defended becomes permanent. So the business owner has to choose humility. Humility to test, humility to measure, humility to document, humility to admit a customer is wrong for the business, humility to admit a product is not worth keeping. Humility to admit the owner is the bottleneck. Humility to admit passion does not pay bills by itself. Humility to admit that a good skill needs a better machine around it. This humility is not weakness. It is what gives the business a chance. Because the market is already hard. Do not add self-deception to it. Do not add ego to it. Do not add avoidable chaos to it. Do not add romantic blindness to it. If you are going to take risk, at least remove the risks that come from refusing to think clearly. That is the responsible version of entrepreneurship. Not safe, but serious. Not timid, but designed. Not passionless, but disciplined. Not slow forever, but sequenced. Because the goal is not to avoid all risk. The goal is to stop confusing unnecessary fragility with courage. There is nothing courageous about underpricing because you are afraid. Nothing courageous about saying yes to bad clients. Nothing courageous about ignoring numbers. Nothing courageous about hiring into chaos. Nothing courageous about growing what is already unstable. Nothing courageous about burning out and calling it ambition. Real courage is different. Real courage is looking at the business without the flattering story. Real courage is fixing what makes you uncomfortable. Real courage is saying no before resentment appears. Real courage is charging enough to deliver well. Real courage is documenting the work even when it feels boring. Real courage is training someone to do what your ego wants to keep. Real courage is building a business that does not need your suffering as proof of love. That is a different kind of entrepreneurship. Less theatrical, more durable. And if you want financial freedom, durable matters. Because a business that depends on drama cannot become a stable asset. It becomes a cycle. Big push, big stress, big relief, big problem, big push again. That cycle can feel exciting. But excitement is not wealth. Options are wealth. Systems are wealth. Time is wealth. Margin is wealth. Trust is wealth. A clear reputation is wealth. A trained team is wealth. A repeatable customer experience is wealth. A business that can function when you are not watching every second is wealth. That is the kind of wealth many people say they want, but few design for. They design for launch. They design for attention. They design for first sales. They design for looking legitimate. They do not design for endurance. And endurance is where the real game begins. Because anyone can be excited for the first week. Many can fight for the first months. Fewer can build something that still makes sense after years. When the novelty is gone. When the market has tested you. When your first assumptions have failed. When customers have revealed what they actually value. When the work is no longer romantic. When the business requires discipline, not adrenaline. That is when the difference appears. The person who wanted only escape starts to feel trapped again. The person who wanted to build starts to improve the machine. Escape is a weak foundation. Construction is stronger. If your only reason to start is that you hate where you are, be careful. That feeling can push you out, but it cannot guide you well. A business needs more than an exit. It needs a design for what comes next. Otherwise, you may leave a job and create a more demanding version of the same prison. Only now the prison has your name on it. And because it has your name on it, it is harder to admit. That is why some owners stay too long in bad models. They are not only protecting money, they are protecting identity. They do not want to say, I built something that is hurting me. So they say, it is just a hard season. Sometimes it is. But if every season is hard in the same way, it is not a season. It is the system. That is a line every owner should remember. If every season is hard in the same way, it is not a season. It is the system. And systems can be changed, but only after you stop calling them temporary. That is where maturity begins, not when the business gets bigger, not when it gets a better logo, not when people start calling it successful. Maturity begins when the owner stops asking only, how do I get more? And starts asking, what must become stronger before more destroys us? That question can save a business, because more is seductive. More sales, more clients, more attention, more locations, more products, more services, more employees, more followers, more everything. But more is only good when the business can digest it. A business that cannot digest growth gets sick from opportunity. That sounds strange, but it is real. Sometimes the thing you prayed for becomes the thing that exposes your weakness. You wanted more clients. Now response time collapses. You wanted more orders. Now quality drops. You wanted more visibility. Now complaints become public. You wanted more employees. Now you spend the day managing confusion. You wanted more revenue. Now cash moves faster, but profit still disappears. You wanted more freedom. Now the business needs you more than ever. That is not because growth is bad. It is because growth without design is pressure. And pressure reveals structure. If the structure is strong, pressure can produce expansion. If the structure is weak, pressure produces cracks. That is why a serious owner does not worship growth. A serious owner prepares for it. They ask, can we sell this clearly? Can we deliver it repeatedly? Can we train someone else to do it? Can we measure quality? Can we collect payment without drama? Can we handle complaints? Can we maintain margin? Can we survive a slow month? Can we say no to bad demand? Can this work without the owner rescuing every step? Those questions are not pessimistic. They are protective. They protect the customer from bad promises. They protect the team from chaos. They protect the owner from burnout. They protect the business from becoming a trap. And that is the real point. A business should not become a trap. It can be hard. It can be demanding. It can require sacrifice. But it should not quietly remove every option from your life. If it does, something has to be redesigned. Maybe the offer. Maybe the price. Maybe the customer type. Maybe the delivery model, maybe the team structure, maybe the schedule, maybe the payment rules, maybe the owner's need for control, maybe the entire business model. That last possibility scares people. But sometimes the most mature decision is admitting that the model itself is wrong, not the dream. The model, there is a difference. The dream might be to help people, to create something useful, to become financially independent, to stop depending on a salary, to build an asset, to use your talent directly. That dream may still be valid, but the model you chose may be weak. Maybe it depends too much on you. Maybe the margins are too thin. Maybe the client is too expensive to acquire. Maybe delivery is too customized. Maybe the market does not value the offer enough. Maybe the operation is too complex for the price. Maybe the business only works if you ignore your own cost. And if that is true, the answer is not always work harder. Sometimes the answer is redesign. Change the offer. Narrow the customer. Raise the price. Remove low-margin services. Package the work differently. Add recurring revenue. Create a premium version. Automate communication. Require payment upfront. Limit customization. Build templates. Train support. Partner instead of hiring. Sell fewer things better. There are many ways to redesign, but none of them appear, while the owner is busy proving the original idea was perfect. That is why attachment is dangerous. You can be committed to the mission without being attached to the first version of the model. The first version is usually incomplete. It is supposed to teach you, not define your identity forever. A mature owner lets the market teach without letting the market control everything. That balance matters. You listen to customers, but you do not let every customer rewrite the business. You study competitors, but you do not copy every move. You follow numbers, but you do not become soulless. You protect standards, but you do not become rigid. You keep improving, but you do not chase every shiny idea. That is ownership. Not just having legal control, mental control, strategic control. The ability to see the business clearly enough to make decisions that are not just reactions, because reacting all day is not leadership. It is survival, and survival mode is a terrible architect. It builds fast. It builds crooked. It builds only for the current emergency. Then the owner has to live inside what survival built. That is why you should not let desperation design your business. Desperation lowers prices too much, accepts the wrong customers, hires too quickly, expands too early, says yes to bad terms, ignores red flags, mistakes movement for progress, and then, when consequences arrive, desperation says, work more. But working more inside a bad design only makes the bad design more expensive. So pause. Not forever, just enough to think. Enough to ask, what am I building? What is this becoming? Does this business give me more options or fewer? Does it become more stable with time or more demanding? Does it teach me or does it just drain me? Does every month reduce dependency or increase it? That last question may be the most important. Every month, the business is doing one of two things. It is either becoming more dependent on the owner or less dependent on the owner. More dependent means more questions only you can answer. More tasks only you can do. More customers only you can handle. More decisions only you can make. More emergencies only you can solve. Less dependent means more clarity, more process, more trained help, more predictable cash, more consistent delivery, more customer trust, more owner attention available for strategy. You do not need perfection. You need direction. If the business is still messy, but moving toward less dependency, that is progress. If the business is making more money, but moving toward more dependency, be careful. It may be growing into a cage, and cages can be comfortable at first. They can be decorated. They can have good revenue. They can impress outsiders. They can make the owner feel important. But a cage is still a cage if you cannot leave, if you cannot rest, if you cannot think, if you cannot say no, if you cannot stop. If you cannot get sick without everything falling apart. That is why the test is simple. Can the business breathe without you? Not forever, not completely, but a little. Can it breathe for a day? Can it breathe for a weekend? Can it breathe through a predictable process? Can it breathe through a trained person? Can it breathe through a clear policy? Can it breathe through systems that remember what you would otherwise have to remember? If not, start there. Do not start with a bigger dream. Start with oxygen. A business without oxygen becomes panic, and panic ruins judgment. When the owner is in panic, every decision becomes defensive. They underprice. They overpromise. They micromanage. They avoid numbers. They accept bad deals. They delay hard conversations. They confuse urgency with importance. Then they wonder why they are tired. They are tired because the business has no breathing room. So build breathing room, a cash reserve even small, a payment rule that protects you. A schedule that does not invite chaos. A process for recurring tasks. A list of customers you no longer want to attract. A clear offer. A simple weekly review. A way for someone else to perform a basic task without you. A boundary around your response time. A standard for quality. A minimum acceptable margin. These are not glamorous, but they are oxygen. And oxygen is more important than applause. The internet often celebrates the visible parts of entrepreneurship. The launch. The sale. The office, the before and after story. The revenue screenshot, the confident speech, the dramatic risk. But the invisible parts decide whether the business survives. The spreadsheet nobody sees, the process nobody praises, the difficult price increase, the client you refuse, the employee training, the delivery checklist, the uncomfortable review of margins, the decision to simplify, the decision not to expand yet. The moment you admit that being busy is not the same as being healthy, that is where real businesses are built, in the invisible decisions. And if you understand that, you are already ahead of the version of yourself that only wanted to escape. Escaping may start the journey, but building has to take over. Because escape energy fades, construction discipline remains. At some point you must stop saying, I just need to get out, and start saying, I need to build something that can stand. That shift is everything, because a business built only as an escape route often repeats the same problem in another form. You leave a boss, then become a harsher boss to yourself. You leave a schedule, then work all day. You leave pressure, then create financial pressure. You leave being undervalued, then underprice yourself. You leave chaos, then build a chaotic business. You leave someone else's system, but never build your own. So you are free in name, trapped in practice. And freedom in name is not enough. The body knows, the calendar knows, the bank account knows, the people close to you know. You can tell the world you are independent. But if every part of your day is controlled by urgent business demands, what exactly did independence give you? That is not a cynical question. It is a clarifying one. Because the goal is not to discourage you. The goal is to make the dream more honest. A business can be a vehicle, but a vehicle needs more than an engine. Your skill is the engine. Important, but not enough. You need steering, brakes, fuel, maintenance, a map, a dashboard, a way to know when something is overheating, a way to repair before the whole thing fails. Many people start with only an engine, and then they are shocked when the ride becomes dangerous. So before you start, or before you keep growing, build the rest of the vehicle. Start with a simple map. Who do you serve? What problem do you solve? Why should they trust you? How do they find you? How do they buy? How do you deliver? How do you get paid? How do you know whether you made money? How do you know whether the customer was satisfied? How do you prevent the same mistake from repeating? How does the business operate when you are not at full energy? Those questions are not optional. They are the real business. And if you are already operating, use them as a diagnostic. Do not use them to shame yourself. Use them to locate the weak points. Maybe the business is not broken. Maybe it is just undocumented. Maybe it is not hopeless. Maybe it is just underpriced. Maybe the team is not useless. Maybe training is unclear. Maybe customers are not impossible. Maybe expectations are vague. Maybe growth is not bad. Maybe it is premature. Maybe you are not failing. Maybe the model needs maturity. That distinction matters, because if you think you are the failure, you may give up. If you see the model clearly, you can improve it. A business is not a moral judgment. It is a system of choices. Some choices work. Some do not. Some worked before and no longer work. Some need to be tested. Some need to be removed. Some need to be repeated. The owner's job is not to defend every choice. The owner's job is to improve the system. That requires emotional distance. Enough distance to ask, if I were buying this business from someone else, what would worry me? Would I trust the numbers? Would I understand the process? Would I know how customers arrive? Would I know what makes money? Would I know what depends too much on the owner? Would I see a business or a person working very hard? That last question is brutal. Would I see a business or a person working very hard? Many small businesses are just that. A person working very hard, with a name, with a logo, with clients, with revenue. But still at the center, one person carrying too much. That can be a stage. It should not be the final design. If it is the stage you are in, respect it, but do not romanticize it. Use it to learn. Use it to understand the customer. Use it to discover what must be standardized. Use it to identify what drains you. Use it to see which services are worth keeping. Use it to build the next version. Do not build your identity around staying there. Because the goal is not to be proud of carrying everything. The goal is to build something that no longer requires you to carry everything. And this is where the strongest owners separate themselves. They are not the ones who never struggle. They are the ones who convert struggle into structure. They do not just say, that was a hard week. They ask, what made it hard, and what must change so this exact pain does not repeat? That question creates progress. Every hard week can either become a story or a system. Most people choose the story. They tell it, They complain. They feel understood. Then they repeat it. Builders choose the system. They extract the lesson. They change the design. They reduce the recurrence. They move forward. This does not make the business perfect. It makes it wiser, and a wise business is rare. A wise business knows that money is not the only cost. There is also attention cost, emotional cost, complexity cost, reputation cost, opportunity cost, health cost, relationship cost, time cost. Some revenue is too expensive when you count all costs. Some growth is too expensive. Some clients are too expensive. Some products are too expensive. Some habits are too expensive. The beginner asks, how much money can this bring? The mature owner asks, what will this require from the whole system? That is a better question, because some opportunities require too much hidden damage, and if you do not count hidden damage, you will keep accepting things that weaken you. This is why a business needs a definition of success beyond revenue. Success could mean healthy margin, repeat customers, lower owner dependency, clearer process, better customer fit, fewer urgent problems, improved cash flow, more predictable delivery, better trained team, more strategic owner time. That is success. Revenue matters, of course, but revenue without health is not enough. It can become a beautiful-looking illness. The business looks alive. The owner feels drained. The bank account feels unstable. The team feels confused. The customer experience feels inconsistent. That is not the kind of business you want to build. You want a business that becomes stronger as it grows. Not just louder, not just busier. Stronger, and strength is built by design. So if there is one idea to keep this. Being good at the work is only the beginning. It is not the model. It is not the strategy. It is not the system. It is not the guarantee. It is the raw material. And raw material has to be shaped. Your skill must become an offer. The offer must become a process. The process must become a standard. The standard must become training. Training must become consistency. Consistency must become trust. Trust must become repeat business. Repeat business must become margin. Margin must become options. Options become freedom. That is the path. Not overnight, not perfectly, but directionally. And if any link is missing, the business becomes weaker there. If the skill never becomes a clear offer, people do not understand it. If the offer never becomes process, delivery is inconsistent. If the process never becomes standard, quality depends on mood. If the standard never becomes training, employees depend on you. If training never becomes consistency, customers lose trust. If trust never becomes repeat business, you chase constantly. If repeat business never becomes margin, you stay busy and poor. If margin never becomes options, the business owns you. That chain is worth studying because it shows exactly where many small businesses break. Not because the owner is lazy, not because the idea is worthless, not because the market is evil, but because one link was never built, and an unbuilt link becomes pressure. The owner feels the pressure, but cannot name it. Now you can name it. Is it the offer? The process? The standard? The training? The consistency? The trust? The margin? The options? Find the missing link, then build there. That is more useful than vague motivation, more useful than working randomly harder, more useful than copying competitors, more useful than blaming everyone. Find the missing link, build there, then move to the next one. That is how a business matures, and maturity is what separates a temporary hustle from something that can support a life. A hustle depends on constant push. A mature business depends on built capacity. A hustle is personal. A mature business is transferable. A hustle pays when you move. A mature business can keep producing through structure. A hustle often proves you are capable. A mature business gives you options. There is nothing wrong with starting as a hustle. But do not confuse the starting point with the destination. If your goal is financial freedom, the destination cannot be endless personal push. It must be a structure that reduces the need for push over time. That is why you should be suspicious of any business idea that only works if you are always available, always motivated, always healthy, always patient, always answering, always selling, always solving, always remembering, always sacrificing. That is not a business model. That is a demand on your life. And your life is not an unlimited input. Treat it as expensive. Because it is. Your time is expensive. Your attention is expensive. Your health is expensive. Your peace is expensive. Your ability to think clearly is expensive. If a business uses those resources carelessly, it is not profitable in the deepest sense. It may show profit on paper, but it is losing somewhere else. And eventually, losses outside the spreadsheet reach the spreadsheet. Burnout affects quality. Stress affects decisions. Exhaustion affects customers. Confusion affects employees. Poor health affects consistency. Lack of rest affects judgment. Everything connects. So build the business as if the owner's life matters. Because it does. A business that destroys the owner is not a strong business. It is a structure eating its own foundation. And no foundation lasts forever under that kind of damage. This is the part that many ambitious people resist. They think protecting themselves means being weak. It does not. It means thinking long-term. Short-term ego says, I can handle it. Long-term strategy asks, should the business require this from me? Those are different. You may be able to handle many things. That does not mean the business should be designed to require them. You may be able to work 14 hours. That does not mean 14 hours should be the model. You may be able to calm every angry client personally. That does not mean every complaint should reach you. You may be able to remember every detail. That does not mean memory should be the system. You may be able to fix every mistake. That does not mean mistakes should remain preventable. Capacity should be used to build better structure, not to compensate forever for missing structure. That is the mature move. Use your current effort to reduce future effort. Use your current knowledge to train others. Use your current pain to identify weak systems. Use your current mistakes to build rules. Use your current client conversations to improve messaging. Use your current chaos to locate what must be simplified. Then the business starts to change, not magically, practically. 1 month, fewer repeated questions. Another month, better payment discipline. Another month, cleaner delivery. Another month, clearer customer fit. Another month, less owner involvement in basic tasks. Another month, better margins. Another month, more time to think. That is real progress. And it may look slower than the fantasy, but it is stronger. Because the fantasy wants a dramatic leap. The real business wants accumulated capacity. Capacity is not always visible, but it is what lets you survive. Then grow, then breathe, then choose. And choice is the heart of freedom. Not simply owning something, not simply being busy, not simply saying, I work for myself. Freedom is choice. Can you choose better clients? Can you choose better prices? Can you choose when to rest? Can you choose not to take a bad deal? Can you choose to step away for a day? Can you choose to think instead of react? Can you choose growth instead of being forced into it? Can you choose strategy instead of panic? If the business gives you fewer choices every year, it is not building freedom. It is building dependency. And dependency is the quiet enemy. So, before you start, or before you expand, ask the uncomfortable question. Is this business designed to give me more choices over time? Or is it designed to need more of me every year? Do not answer with hope. Answer with evidence. What process exists? What margin exists? What customer filter exists? What payment rule exists? What training exists? What metric exists? What can happen without you? What no longer needs your personal rescue? Evidence tells the truth. And truth is what gives you a chance to build something better. Because the goal is not to avoid entrepreneurship. The goal is to stop entering it half-blind. A small business can be a path to independence, but it can also become an expensive job with a nice name. The difference is not motivation. It is design. It is whether you transform skill into system, effort into leverage, customers into trust, revenue into margin, problems into processes, experience into standards, and ownership into options. That is the real work. So do not ask only, am I good enough to start? Ask, can I build something good enough to not depend entirely on me? Do not ask only, will people pay me? Ask, can I deliver profitably, repeatedly, and without destroying my life? Do not ask only, how do I leave my job? Ask, what must be true so I do not create a worse job for myself? Because that is the danger. Leaving a bad job and building a worse one. One with more risk, more hours, more pressure, less certainty, less rest, and a boss you cannot escape because the boss is you. That is why the phrase, be your own boss, is incomplete. The real question is, what kind of boss will you become to yourself? One who burns everything for the illusion of progress? Or one who builds a system that respects the person inside the business? That question matters, because your business will reflect your answer. If you build from panic, it will feel panicked. If you build from ego, it will feel fragile. If you build from desperation, it will accept too much. If you build from clarity, it has a chance, not a guarantee. A chance. And in business, a serious chance is valuable. So build the chance. do the unsexy work. Clarify the offer, know the numbers, protect the margin, choose the customer, set the boundary, document the process, train the role, measure the result, simplify the model, reduce dependency. And then, yes, grow. But grow what is worth multiplying. Not chaos, not exhaustion, not confusion, not underpricing, not owner heroics. Grow clarity, grow trust, grow margin, grow capacity, grow freedom. That is the difference between starting a business and building one. Starting is an event. Building is a discipline. Starting can be emotional. Building must become intelligent. Starting can depend on courage. Building depends on correction. Starting gets attention. Building earns endurance. And if you are serious, endurance matters more. Because anybody can announce a business. Fewer can survive the boring middle. Fewer can face the numbers. Fewer can stop blaming and start designing. Fewer can turn talent into a machine. Fewer can build something that does not eat them alive. That is the level to aim for. Not just a business that opens. A business that becomes healthier with time. A business that creates value without consuming the owner completely. A business that gives customers consistency and gives the owner options. A business where talent was the beginning, but not the prison. So keep your skill. Respect it. Improve it. It matters. But do not worship it as if it were the whole business. Your skill is the spark. The system is the fire that can keep burning without your hand holding the match every second. And if you want freedom, that is what you have to build. Not a performance, not a personal rescue mission, not a more exhausting job, a system, a business, a structure that can stand. Because the final question is not whether you can do the work. You probably can. The final question is whether you can build a business that does not require you to personally carry the work forever. If the answer is no, then be honest. You do not have a business yet. You have a skill under pressure. But if the answer can become yes, then you are building something real. Something stronger than motivation. Something more useful than pride. Something more durable than a good month. Something that can become an asset instead of a cage. And that is the whole point. Not to be busy. Not to be admired. Not to escape one boss and become a harsher one. The point is to build a machine that creates value, protects your life, and gives you more choices with time. If it does that, you may be building a business. If it does not, you may just be buying yourself a job with more risk. And before you call that freedom, look at it again. Look at the hours. Look at the margins. Look at the dependency. Look at the stress. Look at what happens when you are not there. Look at whether the business is becoming stronger or just louder. Then decide. Because being good at the work can open the door, but only a real system keeps the door from becoming a cell.